I would like to call this How to Order. Welcome to the OBEC Mock Debate Round. Contesting this round are Payal High School on Government and Patumwan Demonstration School on Opposition. Before the round begins, allow me to explain the rules of the debate. Each constructive speaker will be speaking for 5 minutes. After the first minute, you will hear one ring like this, signaling that the speaker may be asked points of information. At the fourth minute, you will hear one ring like this, signaling that the POIs can no longer be made. At the fifth minute, you will hear two rings like this, to indicate that the speaker's time is up. At 5:20, you will hear three rings like this, as a reminder for the speaker to conclude his or her speech. Reply speeches last 3 minutes and are protected speeches. Hence, no POIs may be asked. The motion on the floor before is, this House would ban homework. Without any further ado, I would like to call on the Prime Minister to open the debate. Here.
When I went to school, they asked me what I wanted to be when I grow up. Happy, that's what I wrote down. And they told me I didn't understand the assignment. And I told them they didn't understand life. John Lennon. I find it very ironic when adults say, hey, enjoy your childhood. Hey, try new things. Hey, spend some time with your family. Hey, and have fun, live the most out of it. You're only a kid once. Yet these adults are the ones putting loads of work on us, making us have no times to do such things. The question is, why do we go to school? We go to school to understand new ideas. We go to school to explore the wide curiosity we have. We go to school to improve the things we do. Students, what is happening in the status quo? Students are assigned homework on a daily basis from the time these kids start kindergarten until they finish university. This has been going on for many decades because it has become an ideology that homework helps you gain and retain knowledge. But we tell you, knowledge that can also be done in class with the right method of teaching. What are the harms in this debate? With the amount of homework students are receiving, this can cause harms in 3 levels. Number 1, health. Number 2, time. And number 3, the lack of motivation. With that being said, with the amount of homework we have, it causes sleep deprivation, which means that it doesn't allow students to get enough rest they don't allow students to get enough rest, and we see that rest is very essential, especially in the adolescent years. And for time, with the amount of homework we have less time for friends, family, and less time to discover the different ambitions and the different fields outside the school's curricular. Lastly, motivation. By forcing students to do their homework on subjects they don't want would cause the student to not have the motivation to learn, and we see that this is very harmful to the whole education system itself. As government, we support a world where students are able to learn and deepen their understandings without having to work late hours, where students are stressed out and their health is also compromised. The government's burden of proof in this debate is whether which side creates a better learning environment and produce quality citizens who contribute to the development of the country. Before moving on, I like to characterize a few definitions. Number 1, ban is to regulate officially. Number 2, homework. Any work done at home which has relation to school. Our model in this debate is basically all ministries of education must not allow schools to assign homework. Instead, reform class and academic lessons. Education, because we believe that education should be catered towards the students, not their curriculum itself. Rather than improving education achievements, heavy homework load can negatively impact the students' performance. And we see that this should not continue furthermore. We will be discussing 3 main points in my speech. in our speech. Number one, how homework is counterproductive, and my DPM will be discussing about the social gap and the motivation. No, thank you. Studies show that homework has little to no connection towards test scores, and it is redundant in most cases. Homework is usually done after long school hours. Once a student is not ready to do homework, they will deliver a poor quality effort, or perhaps not even completing the assignment at all. This will develop a habit of procrastination in many students by thinking, I could do that tomorrow, or I could copy from a friend tomorrow. Once the student is able to pull it off, he or she will continue to use this tactic in the future, thus develop a bad habit of procrastination, and this will create a detrimental effect towards the students when they grow up in their career and their whole lives as a whole. We also say that homework does not improve study skills and behavior. Although homework is designed to increase the self-responsibility of students, there is no way to check whether an assignment or homework was completed by the student and not the parent or tutor themselves. And this also puts forth that students that are not privileged have an unfair disadvantage. There is plenty of information on the internet that may be copied and plagiarized easily. And we see that, for example, students who aren't as wealthy as other students would not have access to the internet, and therefore would have a strong disadvantage in learning, and in the end of the day not learn anything. So instead, there should be a variety of activities in the classroom which helps children engage and develop skills and facilitate a good learning experience for each and every individual. Thank you.
I thank the Prime Minister and now would like to recognize on the Leader of Opposition to open the opposition's case. Here.
Uh, Opposition believes that homework is still essential to the students' learning. And we believe that by having homework allows the students not only to just feel comfortable with the subject raised questions that they don't understand, but also to actually find themselves or what they like or what they don't like doing through seeing whether or not they enjoy doing that particular homework of each particular subject themselves, right? So before moving on, let's make a few rebuttals, right? Number one, right? They try to claim essentially that homework harms students' health, time, and motivation. We don't think that that's the case, right? If that's what they're trying to claim, we think that number one, the status quo that they try to paint, the picture they try to paint is too extreme, right? Kindergarten kids or primary school, middle school kids, they do not get that much of a workload that actually deprive them of their sleep, take away their time to play, or make them unmotivated in life to the point where they reach midlife crisis, right? We think that the education system itself in status quo, even though it's not perfect, but it already allocates enough work or enough activities to appropriate levels of students or individuals that are learning, right? So that's why we think that all that they try to claim actually applies to upper high school students that actually faces sleep deprivation or may sometimes face insufficient ability to manage their time because of their workload, leading to sometimes a conflict in their life because they're at a crossroad in their motivation. And that's why we think that doesn't actually comes only from the homework itself, but also from the process of education that needs to be reformed, right? And that is actually what they're trying to do. They said that they're gonna transform the education, they're gonna transform the classroom essentially, but they never told you why is it that banning homework away essentially is necessary, which is actually the main burden that they have to prove to you, right? So in opposition, what we try to say is that yes, we can also transform the classroom, but we also think that homework is still essential to the students' learning, essential to the fact that we cannot implement a total ban of homework out, right? And that is why we think that the case actually misinterprets, what is actually out there in status quo. Right? So let's look at what we have, right? Number one, we tell you that our stance is clear that we still believe that homework is essential, and this is our premise, right? We think that the purpose of education is not only to help the students find themselves out, but also to make them comfortable with the subjects or comfortable with the knowledge that they need to get, right? We think that because essentially at the end of the day, what these students are ending up going to being is specialized in certain fields or certain areas when they work in order to develop the country, to develop the economy in essence. And doing homework essentially just helps the students to familiarize with the concepts, with the knowledge, and also helps to the students to identify whether or not they are particularly comfortable with the subject or with the subject matter that they're doing in their homework, right? And that is why we think that it's extremely important that homework is still there, right? Even though they try to claim that homework doesn't increase the knowledge and ends up in copying a students, not learning what they don't want, but we don't think that that's the case for all students, right? Yes, there are students who copied other students' homework, who do not do their homework in on time, but that's actually the purpose of education system, right? Is to try to force students, try to show students of actually when they graduate, when they work in fields, there are responsibilities that they have to take, right? And doing homework is part of the responsibility. To familiarize yourself with the subject matter is actually one of the responsibilities and one of the main purpose of education. While holistic education, allowing students to discover themselves, is also important, we think that we can also do that on our bench by transforming education, by giving appropriate amount of homework to students, and also allow students to take additional elective courses in order for them to help discover themselves, but also at the same time keeping the homework or decreasing the amount of homework to the appropriate level depending on that particular student of what they want to study in the future, right? And because of that, we think that homework is still necessary. Secondly, let's look at the extension here, which is the development of the country. We think that in order for the country to develop, it is required specialization, we required deep knowledge in various fields, from the STEM or the social sciences. And that's why doing homework actually helps these students develop themselves, actually raises questions where students do not understand. And that is why it is extremely important that we continue to put this homework in place, right? Because of this, we think that because status quo is already appropriate, because we believe that we are able to better regulate homework, when we do not completely ban it, we are also able to transform the classroom better than what government is trying to do. We think we are able to give a better life to these students. We think we are able to give these students a better chance at becoming good at what they want to do in the future and develop the country in ways that are productive. And that is why SIDE opposition stands for homework. Supremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank the leader of opposition, and now would like to invite the Deputy Prime Minister here.
Homework was initially designed to help students gain and maintain the knowledge, but many researchers show that homework is just simply counterproductive. Therefore, we as SIDE opposition see that there is a need to change the system in which we teach the children, we teach the people in their next generation. So before I move on, I would like to tackle some rebuttals. So, SIDE opposition claimed that our position, our stance in this debate is too extreme. However, this is the case in many countries. With an increase in the amount of standardized tests, with an increase in comparing your child to another, parents are starting to send children to tutors at the age of 6 in primary 1. And this is the case in the present day. The second rebuttal is that they claim that homework helps the child familiarize with the material. But we see that if only the child familiarize themselves with the material but doesn't fully understand, there's no use in that. We should teach the students how to think, not what to think. So when they grow up, they will be able to learn how to do that independently because they have had help from teachers at a young age. Which is why we see that as by reforming By reforming the educational system and the classroom environment, we are solving the problem at the root cause, not just simply keeping things the way it is. Before moving on,
If your problem is with increasing competition and parents sending their kids to tutoring schools, how does banning homework away from the normal, Ministry of Education state schools that you're trying to implement actually solves the problem of increasing competition and socioeconomic disparity? Thank you.
yes. So, um, we're going to reform the classroom. So we're not just simply going to ban homework, but anything that stays within our principle that harms the child's well-being, that does not promote educational learning and does not create a lifelong learner, we're going to abolish that. And I would like to clarify on the socio-economic factor in my second argument. So the first one is how homework is actually increasing the social gap. Like mentioned before, some children have more advantages when they're at home from tutoring or extra parental supervision when they have to complete assignments. And this is the case in many countries. Even in developed countries such as the US, over 5 million households do not have high-speed internet access for their kids. And as a student, you're in the 21st century, you're going to need that to utilize. And this creates an unfair disparity and increases the social gap in society. So there are many pieces of evidence and factors that contribute to this. From one of them is the socio-economic factors. Parents who only finish high school, parents who have a lower income, and parents who come from racial minority or ethnic minorities, they are less likely to have internet at home. And this is the homework gap that we see today. And most people who are privileged overlook this. When the people making these laws don't see the real problem, this is why we should change it. Moving on to the second, no thank you. Moving on to my second argument on how this will increase the social gap. In less large school where banding is not prevalent, in scenarios where in a classroom there are both people who are advanced at the topic and kids who are not as good. The students who will perform well at school might see the curriculum as easy and become slacking or lazy, while the kids who are not as good feel disengaged.
Last point.
And no thank you. Although this is there might be some exceptions, but this is the case in many classrooms. So, unlike younger children who cannot deal with the stress and competition, this will harm them detrimentally. And especially in high competition schools, there will be the less what we as side government care about are everyone in the educational system, from the kids who are advanced to the kids who are not as advanced. And when we have children and students who cannot deal with stress and they are put into high competition schools, they're going to be banded, they're going to be labeled as the people who are dumb, and this will lead to many effects later on. This will harm the self-esteem and disengage. Right? In Thailand alone, the Independent Committee for Educational Reform estimated over 240,000 children aged 15 to 17 did not continue past Matayom 3. And that is what we see in our country and many countries abroad. This is why we as side opposition believe that we need to create a change. We need to reform the educational system and change this one for the better society as a whole. Thank you very much.
I thank the Deputy Prime Minister and now would like to recognize the Deputy Leader of Opposition here.
There are 4 points of contention in today's debate, and rebuttal will be integrated. First, let's talk about the purpose of education, right? We see that when this debate is about homework, we do not specifically characterize it into school homework or any part of the ministry's homework, but rather a holistic point of view from education, that is the system of homework. Why is this relevant, right? This is relevant because it seems counterproductive for the government side to come up and talk about tutoring, talk about this increase in competition, and without actually acknowledging that these tutoring schools also have homework. And we see that this contradiction within the government side is actually harming themselves. Why? Because if they are okay with the fact that these tutoring school are able to have homework but not actual school, then they're actually talking about choosing their own work, which is actually the core principle of the opposition side team. The leader of opposition side already proved the stance of the opposition side case, and that is how we want each student to be able to find themselves, have appropriate amount of homework, and do this appropriate amount of homework means that if you want to be an if you want to be an engineer, that means that you are going to have more physics homework in comparison to literature homework. And this specialization is what actually will progress the society further. And this is why we see that the concept of optional homework is actually under the opposition side case. But even if there's no homework in this tutoring school, it's not actually solving the issue of competition as the POI have already asked. Second point of contention about how there's homework and there's disparity in the society. We see that the problem with disparity and talking about disparity is that there will always be disparity, right? There's always going to be people who are good at math, and there's always going to be people who are good at reading passages and being able to do that kind of homework quickly. And we see that the problem is that this disparity already exists, and the opposition side paradigm is not actually, the problem is not being solved even under the case, right? The problem of disparity is not today's debate. Today's debate is how there's actually homework, and there's people good at certain things doesn't mean that systematically homework is harmful. Additionally, right, if the problem is accessibility of internet, if the problem is disparity, the proposition side is not solving it either. Think of it carefully. If the problem is about not having accessibility to the internet, banning homework doesn't help. You still don't have Google or YouTube to entertain yourself if that's your means of solving disparity. Therefore, it's come back down that the proposition side is not solving a disparity or any problem that are actually proposing. Moving on to my third point of contention about stress management. The proposition side come up with this idea of how kindergartens and primary school students are not able to deal with the stress that homework actually brought to them. We see that the problem is that these homeworks are not in status quo. Homework are not uniformly apply to every single student, because once you look at lower matheum to upper matheum have more workload. Why? Because at the end of the day, the core value of education is to find the students existence and to be able to know what you actually like and to specialize in certain means. If you're studying math science in upper matheum, you're most likely going to be an engineer, which means you have to get more scientific homework, have more physics homework, more chemistry homework. And we see that this means that when you think about in the other end, in terms of primary school, they actually have less work because they are not being pressured by the fact that they have to fight themselves in 5 years or whatever the case may be. Moving on to my fourth point of contention about how it is actually how plagiarism exists regardless, right? We see that as we have shown you repeatedly, that the core principle of education is to prepare the student for real life. This means that the homework is actually a good representation of what actually happened when you work in an actual companies. There are going to be workloads, and these workloads are actually going to eat into your home time. And these homeworks are actually a good representation. If some students, because we already told you that it's not all students who plagiarize, if some students actually plagiarize, we see it's actually a fault upon themselves of not being to be responsible enough to solve the issue. But that doesn't mean that homework is holistically bad. And this is why we believe that homework should not be banned. This is why we believe that it is in the interest of the principle of education that we keep homework. That's why we're so proud to oppose.
I thank the Deputy Leader of Opposition, and now would like to invite Government Whip to conclude the government's case. Here.
First of all, I would like to clarify to you that the free will to live is to be able to achieve your dreams and accomplish your ambition, to be whatever you want in your future, right? So we need to figure out what the right dosage is. Currently, it's much too high. So, we strongly believe that you would be able to discover yourself. There, and this would be the key to a successful life. Not only that this would secure your suffering, but also achieve the state of transcendent bliss and well-being. With pressure, students wouldn't be able to catch up. There would be suffering and depression. So, moving on to my first rebuttal. The first rebuttal side opposition has stated about feeling homework would give you the chances to be feeling comfortable on doing the homework, and to see that they enjoy the subject or not, but and to give them more time responsibility, right? So the first problem here is that students don't like asking the teacher. They won't learn from their mistakes. They are forced, so they wouldn't be even learning. They would just like go out to their classrooms. They would copy their friends. They would cheat on exams. And the second problem is that there wouldn't be any opportunities for students to live out of their comfort zones. Most schools, extracurricular activities cost, and we want our students to be happy on what they're doing. Not saying that you should have like no time responsibility at all, but you should have the correct dosage, as I already stated. The second rebuttal is that tutoring. It's only an example. It's not a core principle. Even if this is a principle, this also creates a huge gap between the rich and the poor, right? And teachers and students. And schools, they require students to do their homework. Schools are for learning. They're for teaching the students, not for the students to learn by themselves and to study at home by themselves by not having anyone to learn, right? Homework doesn't help our citizens to solve real life situations. So moving on to the foundations. The first foundation is about freedom of time. Homework doesn't prove to yourself that you have the potential to do stuff that you are intellect in, right? For example, people who learn to become an engineer. He was forced to become an engineer, but also wanted to be a decorator, right? So he drops down from engineer, and he wasted his whole 4 years of learning and become an engineer, right? Which he doesn't like. And an example of people who are smart doesn't mean that they will accomplish every ambition in life. The second foundation is about homework doesn't improve our skills or knowledge as much as real life experiences. For example, students who have like people who do not live out of their comfort zones. There are plenty more stuff to learn in your life, and you would have to manage your housework to do the most common things in life, which students do not know how to do or solve these problems. Most people do not think this and underestimate this because they would just learn, right? They wouldn't think about having to do housework. They wouldn't have to think about paying the electricity bills, right? They would say that I have no free time to do that. But no free time is just a part of speech saying that I have too much homework to deal with, and this gives the students to be less productive. So moving on to the justification. The first justification is about socialization. When you have tons of homework to do at home, you won't be able to relax. You won't have time to go out with your friends. This means that you would lose your opportunity to make connections with your friends, which is very important for your life. The second part of the justification is about ineffectivity.
Last chance.
So you would just come back from your school from the evening. You would not be motivated. You would not be in the mood for doing your homework, and you would be tempted by like video games, social media. Students wouldn't be able to achieve their homework goals in their fullest potential. And another example that we see often is Finland. Schools are equal, students are equal, and there is no homework. There are no schools that are better than others, right? And this is why they are well developed. It's one of the highest education of all. So moving on to my first clash is about effectivity of time. On our side, we have stated to you many times that we would give students the time to search on what they like, to explore their childhood and be motivated on what they are doing. And the second of all, it gives opportunity for the students to be in a better environment to achieve their ambitions. However, on their side, they have lack of motivation. Students would have lack of motivations and health problems, as there would be sleep deprivation, no rest at all. The average sleep hour is 8 on students, right? But right now, teenagers in Thailand, they sleep only 6 hours, which students would not be essentially able to do their work in the future, right? They would become unemployed. They would this destroys the economy for the whole country, and this also destroys life. And this is why I'm supremely proud to propose. Thank you.
I thank the government whip and now would like to call on the opposition whip to conclude the opposition's case. Here.
So firstly, before I move on to some of the clashes presented within today's debate, let's actually compare the models between their side and our side, right? Their side is saying that they need to completely ban homework because it causes too much stress, causes health deprivation, and causes less valuable time to spend with friends for these students, right? But we think that even if without homework, right, it doesn't mean that you're gonna completely stop these kind of problems, right? Because we think that health, time, and lack of motivation stems from these kids, right? We think that homework, just because right now in the status quo there's too much, it doesn't mean that it needs to be completely tarnished and thrown away, right? We still believe that it should be the kids and the students' choice to choose. And we say that classroom activities, we're not saying that we don't support that. We completely support that, and we are gonna try to have a mixture of these two factors within the educational system and make the kids transcend what they believe that they can be and become a better citizen of the world, right? We think that it's extremely dangerous for their side to present the harms that they have shown, right? Because the harms, they haven't really shown any link between the harms and homework, right? They say that by banning homework, suddenly kids are gonna become, the social gap is gonna be hindered, right? We don't think that even, they haven't really shown any evidence on why that is the case. And when they talk about kids being lazy and not doing homework and copying off friends, we understand that yes, the problem may stem from having too much homework, but it still doesn't justify the fact that you need to ban homework. Because we think that with less homework and the homework that the kids actually enjoy and want to do so they can pursue their jobs and future dreams, that is the actual way to make kids unlazy and make kids do their homework, right? Because even if there's still too much homework and kids often copy from other kids, we think that there's punishment in hand where where the teachers can actually say that, hey, you shouldn't copy, you should manage your time, and you should try to become more of a better citizen when you grow up. There's teachers, and the other fact that they have presented is about kids, when they don't understand a question in their homework assignment, they're suddenly gonna lose all value from that homework. We think that there's teachers in place to tell these kids what that answer has to be done, because these teachers actually check these homeworks for these kids. So we think that all of their arguments and all of their harms falls because they haven't really shown any link, right? They say that they say that homework doesn't actually benefit the kids. They say that statistics shows that, right? But they haven't even given any explanation why that actually happens. So today, let's move on to the clash. I have only one clash in today's debate, which is why the benefits of homework outweigh the harms presented from their side, right? We think that homework, as we've shown you, is the purpose of education is making kids understand what responsibility is, what they have to do, and why they need to become more responsible for their actions. Number two, the purpose of education is also trying to make these kids find what their passion is, find the jobs that they want. We think that these benefits are better developed on our side than their side. Why? We believe that by including homework, which the kids can choose, and it's not given to them too much or having too much workload, we think that these kids can do these questions. If they don't understand the questions, they can ask the teacher, and if they're interested, they can pursue more on this path, right? But what their side is saying that there's going to be no homework. There's going to only be classroom activities, which I agree that real life experiences are more important than homework, but we're not tarnishing that as well. We're including both things, which means that these benefits are happen better on our side. Next, the harms that they have presented, right? The harms about health. We think that health and sleep, what they have presented, having kids being depressed just because there's too much homework, is not really that realistic, right? Their entire analysis is very dystopianish, where it's like too out of reality, right? We think that we think if the kids can choose what homework they want to do, they can actually manage their time. And about the lack of motivation, right? When kids get to do what homework they want to do, they're gonna have more motivation. So we think that these three harms are tarnished. Next, about the social gap and how kids are lazy. We think that about the social gap, it doesn't really matter in this debate, right? Because homework is not about increasing the social gap. It's about making kids understand what they want to do and paving the paths for them. Next, about the laziness of these kids, right? We think that homework is actually the things that will fix these kind of behaviors, because they can now manage the time and be more responsible. This is why we are supremely proud to oppose. Thank you.
I thank the opposition whip, and now would like to invite the opposition reply speaker here.
Proposition paints up a very confusing paradigm, right? It's still unclear what their problem is and what they're trying to do, or what stance are they actually defending. Because while they claim that they want to ban essentially all 100% of homework, their analysis and their arguments seems to be based upon the fact that there's too much homework in status quo, and that homework should be decreased and not taken completely away. Right? But moreover, we think that there are other problems with their case that needs to be acknowledged. Number one, I've already told you that they mischaracterized, or they misrepresented what actually happens in status quo. We think that the amount of workload that actually even take the case at their very best case, take away the sleep time or the time decreases stresses the students out, are usually the older kids, right? That are getting ready to go to university, getting ready to become a member of society, getting ready to go into the working field. And therefore we think that because of that, it is essential that when you work in fields in real life, you actually will be given, depending on your job, some amount of work to do, which sometimes you will not finish within the time that within your office hours, that you have to take home and do as your homework essentially. And so that is why doing homework is actually one of the skills, right? Managing your time is one of the skills. Some students may fail, some students procrastinate, struggle, but guess what? Because the teachers there, because of the systems of classroom that are in place, it actually helps these students to learn the skills of responsibility, to learn the skills of doing their work and managing their time, right? And that is why we think that taking them at the very best case, our case still stands and better helps these students at the end of the day, right? Secondly, right, we think that homework also fulfills the holistic side of education that they try to claim, that students, they don't have time to actually discover themselves. We think that students have a lot of time actually before they become old to actually discover yourself. And also because we want to transform the homework to a sense that where you can actually personalize your homework and actually take more homework from classes that matters more to you. We think that that actually helps students to discover who they are and find their passion of what they want to do in life, because again we're talking about older school kids. Thirdly, right, on the point of socioeconomic disparity, which is completely irrelevant to the debate, right? We think that banning homework doesn't actually solve socioeconomic disparity. We think what they try to claim is that there are rich kids who will be better educated than the poor. Yes, that's the reality. But then banning homework doesn't actually solve it. That requires government policy, spending more money into education, alleviating the poverty maybe. But essentially banning homework doesn't take away that gap at all, right? It further harms the students, the poor students essentially, that can do these homeworks, discover themselves, and find questions to ask to the teachers, ask for help, and actually improve themselves to better become competent individuals, in order to become better adults, in order to develop the country and the society to make the world the better place. Thank you.
I thank the opposition reply, and now would like to invite government reply speaker to close the debate here.
School is supposed to provide a good learning environment. Students go to school to learn. We prepare students for real life because we teach the students how to think, what not to think. When students have an understanding of their subjects, when students have an understanding of what they want to do in life, this is what we as side government aim to do. We see that the main goal of this debate is whether which side could create a better learning environment and provide quality citizens that contribute to the development of the country. We want to create children who will not do homework just because the adult gives it to them. We want to create a student who asks an adult for work and learning resources to do. That is what we want in our society. So, moving on, I would like to compare both sides and our position in this debate. For side government, we would create an educational environment where socio-economic disparity is less prevalent in society. While side opposition says that children should have the ability to choose their electives. But if you don't reform how students get into university, how the classroom environment is set, how the premise of this debate is, we see that side opposition failed to prove and then they just simply claimed without justifying why they think that is true. I think both sides here want to create a good learning environment. But however, everything that they said is completely mutually exclusive. If we want to foster a child's education holistically, we should not force a child to learn. We should make the child want to learn themselves. So, we see that we as side government has created a better learning environment where a child will want to pick up the learning electives, the homework, and then we have provided contextual evidence, analysis, and justified the reasons why we believe this to be true. So, moving on, I think the main question in this debate is that why we think that the existence of homework is justifiable. Because as side government, we see that homework does not really teach a child or a student how to actually do well in life. Because if we want to create an independent child who will go on in life to be able to learn what to do, we should create an environment where they learn how to survive, not an environment where they constantly worry about an assignment, a project, a piece of homework they have to carry out to do. Because what matters most in life is that if a child should be able to be independent in life, in real life, their experiences, not just simply by doing worksheets or reading. So in conclusion, we see that as side government, we have created a learning environment where everyone is able to be represented equally. Because the main goal of education is to help a child be independent in life and ready for the future, right? Education should be catered toward the child, not towards the curriculum. And that is why we as side government is extremely proud to propose.
The House would like to thank both sides of the House. And now please cross the floor and shake hands. Please leave the room to allow the adjudicators to come up with the decision.